All right, hello everybody. Welcome to our next lesson as we continue imperialism. Today we're going to talk about the geopolitical game. So our objectives and standards are to examine the decline of the Ottoman Empire and identify geopolitics. Take a moment here to read over the standards if you would, please. Our desired result, how did geopolitics change the world? One vocabulary word, so I know in the beginning I've asked you here to break down or try to break down this word geopolitics. So geopolitics is the taking of land and resources for strategic purposes. So you can maybe break this word down into two parts if you want to further and say geo, which has to do with geography. I'm just going to write that up here for you. Again, I apologize for my kind of scratchy handwriting. Again, you may have already figured this out for yourself, but just in case you want to have it. So geo would be relating to geography, and then politics. Well, we can relate that to government or political systems, control, things like that. So we're taking control of geography. So I fix that here. Taking control of geography in terms of politics and political control for different resources and things like that. Again, just a different way to think about this word, and it also applies to what we're going to be talking about in this lesson as well. So the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. We talked about the Ottoman Empire. Some of you were here. We talked about the Ottoman Empire back in the fall, talking about how powerful and strong the Ottoman Empire had become. Remember, it was pretty much a very powerful empire and one of the strongest kind of organizations on the planet. But the once powerful empire began to decline due to weak sultans, which we did talk about in the fall. If you can remember back to, there was some inner fighting and conflicts with the government and people in the government not getting along. So it begins to weaken the Ottoman Empire. If you look at this top map here, you'll see this is the Ottoman Empire around 1812. You can see the green, how big the Ottoman Empire was, taking up a good portion of Africa here, a good portion of the Middle East here, and even some of Europe. They was in control of Greece and some other regions. So the Ottoman Empire had a pretty good span. Like we said, there was some fighting due to some different groups and factions. Corruption was also a problem. And the territories of the Ottoman Empire are going to become independent. If you remember back to nationalism, we talked about how Greece is going to fight for independence from the Ottoman Empire and succeed in doing so. So about 101 years later, if we look at this map, we can see in 1913 how small the Ottoman Empire has shrunken down to. You can see that's lost a lot of part of Africa, mainly because, again, many European nations were taking control of Africa. Most of its control in Europe is gone, so it's really only limited to the Middle East. So we can see that the Ottoman Empire, again, is really struggling. So the grab for land. Europeans began to notice this decline of the Ottoman Empire as well. Now again, geopolitics is the taking of land for strategic or resource purposes. Could be for coal or iron to run factories and machines, or it could be for military purposes, such as maybe they want a part of the world because they want to put a naval base there. That way they can trade or expand their power in the region. So it could be a couple of things. It could be for, like we said, coal or other natural resources, or it could be for naval purposes. All right, so the Ottoman Empire is a key strategic area with access to the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. So Russia and the Ottomans. Russia had been looking for a passage to the Mediterranean Sea for some time now. We know that Russia had been kind of a landlocked country, really didn't have access to, the European waterways to get to Europe and trade and things like that. So they're looking for a passage to the rest of the world in a way. Russia had tried to form an alliance with the Ottomans, but it never seemed to work. Finally, in 1853, Russia is going to go to war with the Ottoman Empire over territory on the Black Sea. So this is going to become known as the Crimean War. The war was named this for the peninsula on the Black Sea where most of the fighting took place. So this was on the Crimean Peninsula, on the Mediterranean Sea, where we said, or on the Black Sea, I'm sorry, where most of the fighting will take place. Now, the British and the French are actually going to come to the aid of the Ottoman Empire to prevent Russia from controlling the area. Now, the Russians did lose the war, but the Ottoman Empire also continued to weaken and lose land as well. In this picture here of this depiction, on the right-hand side you can see the British over here, and on the left-hand side would be the Russians. So this is just to show you what some of the fighting was like in the Crimean War. If you've ever heard of the nurse, maybe you've heard of the name before, Florence Nightingale, a very famous nurse, and she became very famous during the Crimean War for her service of taking care of these soldiers and also beginning to try and establish the world's first Red Cross. So this is when Florence Nightingale begins to come about. So Russia against Great Britain. For most of the 1800s, Russia competed with Great Britain for control of the Middle East, and this will become known as the Great Game. Now, the Great Game will center around control of India, which we'll talk about later this week, but India will remain mostly in Great Britain's control. Now, Russia will gain control of Afghanistan when the British left in 1881, but again, the British will keep control of India, which was very valuable to them. Again, we'll talk about that later on this week as well. Alright, so our closure, think about how did geopolitics change the world? What were people looking for in terms of geopolitics? What was their objective? And how does this kind of play into imperialism? How does geopolitics play into European nations looking to expand their power and control different areas? Alright, so I hope you have a good rest of your day or evening. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll hopefully talk to you soon.